For a new franchisee, leasing a property can be a daunting challenge, but with good advice, it can be turned into an important business tool. Today, we'll touch on why a property lease is important to you as a franchisee, the typical costs involved in a lease and what areas you need to master, how to manage the lease successfully, what is a lease and why is it important to you. A property lease is important because it's the legal agreement between a landlord and a tenant recording the terms and conditions that they'll both be bound to over the lease term. The lease confirms the legal description of the premises, the parties to the lease, the duration of the lease and the renewals, what the rental value is, and the details of the rent reviews. A lease is also important if the tenant is well informed. It will use the lease to avoid pitfalls and be aware of how it can be used to support its business goals. Over any lease, circumstances change, and either party may wish to depart from the original agreement to lease. A well-designed lease and negotiated lease will take this into account by carefully laying out the responsibilities of each party over the years of the lease term. It's always feasible to renegotiate a lease, given willingness by both parties. Should a difference not be able to be resolved by discussion, though, the lease will include a process to resolve the dispute. So a good question is, why should I pay attention to the rental cost? Rental is usually the second highest cost after staff, and therefore is a key factor in the profit achieved by a franchise. When considering premises, you shouldn't simply just check the annual rental. There are a number of other monthly operating costs too, like rates, insurance, repairs and maintenance, cleaning and electricity for common areas, building warrant of fitness costs, etc. There's about 13 of them altogether. The total of rental and those operating expenses is known as the total occupancy cost. Another question, how do rent reviews work? Well, when the lease is negotiated, the landlord and the tenant will agree the method to be used to review the rent. The rent will be reviewed regularly to keep it current with the rest of the property market. The most common methods at present are applying the Consumer Price Index to the current rental, fixed increases at each review, current market rental level. With rental being one of the largest influences of success in property, getting independent good advice is essential when negotiating the initial lease and at rent review time. Another question, why is a personal guarantee or bank bond often required? In most leases, the tenant is actually a company or some other legal entity, so landlords usually require the directors of the company to personally guarantee the payment of the rental and all the other terms and conditions of the lease. Where a tenant is unwilling or unable to offer a personal guarantee, it is becoming increasingly common for tenants to arrange a bond from their bank. This can be an expensive option though. Another question, what is end of lease responsibilities? Well, at the end of the lease, many landlords require the tenant to remove all of its fixtures and fittings and chattels and to reinstate the premises to the same condition they were at the commencement of the lease. Because this can be surprisingly expensive, you should make sure you understand the terms and implications involved. How do we get the best out of a lease? In our experience, those tenants that treat their lease as a business tool are more likely to see the opportunities available to them throughout the whole of the life cycle of the occupation of their premises. They keep good records. They take advice from independent experts. For these tenants, the lease is a predictable series of events, with rent reviews and lease renewals being recorded and planned for. Good preparation and planning is important. The relationship with the landlord is an important factor too, in getting the best out of the premises experience. In multi-tenanted properties such as shopping malls, there may be several property managers, so this may be a challenge. So good record keeping is essential. So what we've covered today is why a lease property is important to you as a franchisee, the typical costs involved in a lease and what areas you should master, and how to manage property leasing successfully.